My guest today is Miss Wena Supernaw. She is the elected Quapaw Nation Business Committee Chair in Oklahoma, which has a long lineage in Arkansas, and today has found its way back to its roots by owning and operating Saracen Casino Resort in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Prior to Wena being elected chair of the Quapaw Nation, she spent 30 years as the global process leader of management reporting for MetLife Incorporated. Like so many of my guests, she has a wide heart and a strong work ethic. In addition to her demanding job at MetLife, she served as a board of directors, secretary, and governance chair for Big Brother's Big Sister, where in 2021, she was named Board Member of the Year. She is an Oklahoma native and an enrolled member of the Quapaw and Osage Nation. And my favorite, she was appointed head woman dancer for the 2010 Kahikastu powwow. Did I say that right?
Not quite.
Come on, say it.
Kahikastu.
Oh, Kahikastu powwow. I asked Google how to say it. They didn't know how to say it either. It was with honor and pleasure to welcome to the table the Quapaw Nation Business Chair and Powwow Dancer, Kahikastu. Did I say it right then?
You did good.
All right. Miss Wena Supernaw. Hey, Wena.
Haway. That means hello in Quapaw.
Haway. We were talking about your name, and before we came on the show, you've got to tell us about your name. Wena is actually pronounced
Wena,
which is beautiful, but you southerned it up.
I did.
As
I
we
can't
all
help
do.
but speak in Okie.
Yeah.
Wena.
Wena. And it means second girl in Quapaw.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what, I guess that's what you were.
Yeah.
And Supernaw, come on.
Well, it's more French Canadian.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
I have absolutely no idea. And part of my other side of my family, they came out of Canada through Michigan and are Muncie, Delaware.
And Supernaw is a French
Canadian. Mm-hmm.
So it has nothing to do with some Indian name like your great great grandfather who's named Tall something.
Tall Chief.
Tall, was he a chief?
Yes.
So Wena, everybody, is short. And I came in here and I said, Wena, you're the shortest little Indian I've ever seen. And she said, which is really weird because my grandfather was
Tall Chief.
Tall Chief.
What happened to my side of the family, I can never explain.
So your lineage is both Quapaw and Osage.
Correct.
So your mother and father?
Just my father. My mother's Irish.
Your mother's Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Your father is Osage and Quapaw.
Correct. And Muncie, Delaware, although that's not a federally recognized tribe. So
Muncie, Delaware?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about your father's lineage and how your mother met him.
So
obviously not on the reservation.
It was in Oklahoma. It's all on reservation land.
Okay.
So, but yeah, they originally met, I want to say in 1955. She was a high school sophomore. He was a senior, and they were together ever since then. So he went off to war for the U.S. Army, spent some time in Korea, came back, thank goodness. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
And they were married. Before he passed away, they were married for 53 years. It's an inspiration.
Yeah, it is.
And I never saw him fight.
No
Ever.
way.
Never saw him fight. I'm sure they did, but they kept it to themselves.
Are you married?
Yes.
You fight with your husband?
In our own way. We just kind
So
of...
your kids can say the same thing?
We don't have any kids.
I
We just kind of go our own separate way.
Nobody sees them fight.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Greg, you can't say that about your dad and me.
No, I can't.
I've held a few green bean cans off the back porch at my husband standing in the carport a few times.
Our listeners know all about
as
that.
he left for deer camp on a Saturday morning.
I hope none of them
left
hit.
me with three or four kids at home.
Not that we saw.
But no, not to dwell on that. Not that I'm not still a little angry.
All right.
So they met in high school. So that means was that on the reservation? I guess not.
Yeah, that was actually in Skiatook, Oklahoma, where I was, born, and that's part of the Osage Reservation.
Okay.
So your Irish mother went to school on the reservation?
Yes, she actually went to school in Sperry, and that's Shawnee land. So most of Oklahoma is Indian territory.
Most of Oklahoma is.
60% of the land base is Indian territory.
I did not realize that. So everybody goes to high school then on reservations, probably.
Almost, unless you're out in no man's land or right in the middle of the state in Oklahoma City, most of it is Indian territory.
Did you grow up on a reservation?
Osage Reservation.
But you're the Quapaw head?
Correct. So that's an interesting part of our history. One of the times that the Quapaw were displaced, and it happened multiple times over hundreds of years, a lot of the Quapaw, once our reservation was designated in northeastern Oklahoma, it wasn't fit for growing crops. And so they were starving. My great-great-grandfather took a bunch of the Quapaw, the bulk of them, to Osage County, and they sought refuge with Osage Nation, and they lived there, and they, somewhat prospered there. And that's when my great-great-grandfather, who was full-blood Quapaw, he met and married a full-blood Osage woman, and they had one child. She's Grandma Supernaw. So, and she's quite well known among the Quapaw. So it was very common for a lot of Quapaw and Osages to be together. But that's not the first time. This is a really cool story. So Quapaw is one of 5 Degi-Ha-Suan tribes, if you will. We were all one at one point. And this goes all the way back to Angel Mounds as well as Cahokia, hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
So they were all part of what tribe?
One tribe, Degi-Ha.
Degi-Ha.
It was Quapaw, Omaha, Osage, and Ponca. We were all together. And then as westward migration took place, and this was long before European first contact, we don't really know why they started moving. It could have been wars, it could have been famine, it could have been a variety of things. But they started moving west and ended up at the Mississippi River. And then it's basically pretty much where they split. I'm oversimplifying. But that's what Quapaw is. It's Ogapa, and it means downstream people. When the rest of them either went further north or further west, we went south down the Mississippi until we ended up at really the confluence of the White, Arkansas, and Mississippi rivers. That's here. That's our homeland.
Yeah.
So we're the downstream people.
The downstream people.
But so I guess historically over time, because all of those populations split up and kind of relatively populated the same parts of what we now know as North America, like as history goes on, I guess you get overlap again, like in the case of your parents.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Between the Quapaw and Osage, and they came
yeah.
together again. And our language was the same until we split up. So that's what you'll find. And there are people that study this stuff their entire lives, and they're experts on this. That we know a little bit about when we all split up because of certain words that are different. The word horse is different between those 5 tribes because, of course, horses came in from the Spaniards from the south. And so we all developed our own word for the word horse, for the animal.
Because you were all different tribes, peoples, populations by that point. Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yes. And you're a history buff.
I love reading. I love reading about Quapaw.
Uh-huh. And is it true that the tribes fought amongst themselves?
Oh, absolutely. One of our oldest buffalo robes that's actually in France. It's with I'm going to mess it up, Musée d'Orsay. Anyway, so I can't.
That's pretty right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I studied French, and please don't tell my French teacher. She was a lovely woman, but she knew I was useless. So anyway, one of our oldest buffalo hides is a scene. It's a 3 Villages robe. And it's actually been here in Arkansas at the Historical Arkansas Museum before when it was on a traveling tour. And we're trying to get it back, that and others, to the U.S. over the course of the next couple of years through consultation with the French government. But that 3 Villages robe shows a scene between the Quapaw fighting with another tribe. I won't mention it because I don't want to.
Why?
Well, because they're U.S. congressional members that are enrolled into those tribes, and we like to keep things peaceable.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, Quapaws are winning. We're chasing them away.
So they did fight among themselves. But at the same time, it seemed like what I learned in getting ready for the show was once the government started moving them off their land and moving them to Oklahoma and other places, that they kind of united as a group, maybe more so than before.
Well, at least the U.S. Cavalry wasn't going to let the Native Americans fight with one another anymore. That was the whole point. They wanted to divide everybody up to, assimilate, separate, segregate.
Divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
How did 30 years at MetLife prepare you for this chair position at the Quapaw Nation? And where did you live most of your life? Did you have to live? Did you live in Oklahoma for the MetLife insurance? It said global, so I was concerned about if you traveled a lot.
Yeah, I traveled a lot. I started with MetLife in Atlanta, and I was there for about 17 years in the Atlanta area. And then there came a time where I had to make a decision. They were shutting down our offices in Atlanta, and my choices were either to go to New Jersey or to Florida. I chose Florida. Ended up in Florida for another 17 years, and that's where I retired. So, it was always in the U.S., never at headquarters in New York. But as MetLife went through their global acquisitions, through a couple of different rounds, we ended up acquiring scores of international insurance companies. And so part of what my role was, and this was I thought I don't want to say the most fun, but the most challenging and the opportunities for really great development and learning, was to integrate those international insurance companies onto our domestic and sometimes global platforms. It just gave a very, very different perspective of the way that other cultures treat one another, either in a professional setting or a personal setting. It was just a real eye-opening experience. So at one point, I had team members in Hong Kong, Tokyo, Ireland, New York, and the bulk of them were in India, as well as some in the U.S. So,
do you have to have interpreters?
No. On some occasions, we would have certain team members that had really excellent local team members who had excellent language skills. So there was one accounting manager in Tokyo that, his English wasn't that great and my Japanese was non-existent. And so we would use other team members to help facilitate. But remember, our language skills didn't have to be so prolific because you're not contemplating, issues of the universe. You're trying to talk about financial reporting and accounting terminology. So it kind of, decreases the population of the type of words that we needed to learn in order to converse.
Vocabulary.
Yeah.
What did you study in school that made you able to get this job? That sounds like a great job.
Yeah, it was a great job. Mine is a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting. So, numbers tell the story. It doesn't matter which language you're talking about.
So that's what you're doing for the Quapaw Nation now?
To some extent, yeah. There are many other aspects to it that I've had to learn on the job. But some of the things, going back to your initial question, in terms of lessons learned at MetLife that are actually applicable, things like governance, following the rules. What are our laws? How do we interpret the operational impact of those laws? All that is very much in common. It's not any different than any other kind of governance structure, if you will. And that's what the Quapaw Nation Business Committee is there to do, to ensure that we adhere to our Quapaw laws at all times.
So you haven't lived most of your life on the reservation, but you're back on it now?
Yes.
You're back on the reservation,
I'm
as they
home.
say? Does it feel like home? What is it like for most people that grow up on the reservation? And why do they all want to go away?
Well, two things, and I'll use my own family story as a little bit of a highlight. So my dad grew up on the Osage Reservation. His family, by that point, they didn't have sufficient funds for him to go to college. He graduated in 1957. Oklahoma was a very, very different place at that time. And so that's when he went into the Army. When he came back and he and my mother got married and started their family, he actually went back to school at the University of Tulsa on the GI Bill. And that was what really helped him. But in order for him to grow his career, he had to move. And that's the same experience that a lot of Quapaw families had at that time in both the 50s as well as the 60s. And then he moved, all of us, to a multitude of places across the country. And it was to get a better life. find additional
What
opportunities.
was his career? Military still?
No, he wasn't. He was still government service, federal law enforcement. He was a U.S. postal inspector.
Oh, really?
And his degree is in accounting, too.
Y'all are numbers people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great place to take a break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Oklahoma's Quapaw Nation chairperson, Miss Wena Supernaw. Still to come, history of the Quapaws and the parallels to the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, and the whys and hows of the tribe's decision to build the Saracen Casino in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And maybe if we have time, we'll get Wena to share some betting tips with us. We'll be right back.
Do you have something to say? Say it in flying colors. I'm Megan McCoy, and my family owns and operates flagandbanner.com. We believe that flags tell a story and banners make an impression. Whether it's for your business, organization, or special event, custom flags and banners will make your message soar. Visit flagandbanner.com for high-quality products and quick turnaround. We're not just any flag company. We're the experts that answer the phone.
We're speaking today with Miss Wena Supernaw, the head chair of Oklahoma's Quapaw Nation, the tribe who founded the Saracen Casino in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and has deep roots in Arkansas. Okay, Wena, I couldn't watch it. It upsets me. I can't watch dramas like this. But in the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, it tells the story of a series of murders that took place in Oklahoma against the Osage Nation for their oil rights. How did that did you watch it, and how did that movie affect you?
I have watched it numerous times, picked up different things on different occasions. When I was I was born there on the Osage Reservation. Nobody ever talked about it. Even the families that were directly impacted, they didn't talk about it to their own kids and grandkids
Why do you
and
think that is?
great-grandkids to protect them.
From what?
To protect them. There was always this back current that it was still happening.
Oh.
So, and this is true for both Quapaw as well as Osage. There are normal prices when you walk into a store, and then there are Quapaw and Osage prices. Do you remember the scene where he's talking to the undertaker and the outrageous price of the mahogany coffin?
I didn't watch the movie. It makes me too upset.
So there are different prices for different people.
So they gave him a different price to the Indian.
Inflated.
Still.
Mm-hmm.
So how does talking about that help or hurt the case?
I'll give you an example. So for the Quapaw, where our resources were exploited along with the people are when the lead and zinc mines were going. In the early 1900s, started 1907, and then mines shut down in 1970. That's the reason so much of the Quapaw Reservation is a Superfund site. It's called Tar Creek.
Superfund?
I've seen this before, yeah.
What's Superfund mean?
So the Superfund is run by the Environmental Protection Agency. Congress enacted legislation in the 1990s that where these enormous environmental disasters took place, there were designated dollars and resources made available to correct it. And so that's right, clean it up.
And that happened on the Osage Nation.
Quapaw
Nation, Quapaw Reservation.
Correct. So the mining fields of Pitcher, Cardin, some communities that don't even exist. Pitcher is a ghost town at this point because of a buyout that took place to move the residents out of that immediate area because the lead contaminants were so terrible. And these subsidence, which is basically sinkholes, if you will, the lead in the kids' blood level was so high. And of course, it's directly correlated with learning disabilities, disease. The lead levels we still actively monitor in the air, the water, as well as the ground.
How did the lead get so high? From mining?
So what happened was the way that they would mine, it wasn't just vertically down in the ground.
Yeah.
They would go down and out to get into those rich veins. And then they'd go further down and out.
And what were they mining?
Lead and zinc.
And so all the people that work there are dead, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, because of when the mine shut down, I mean, they were basically closed by the 1970s. But we literally had 70 years of unregulated, unsupervised mining activity on the Quapaw Reservation. The Bureau of Indian Affairs had that responsibility, and they breached that trust. The whole point of the story is
they didn't have to let them mine there, and they let them
yes.
for the money to try to keep the reservation going, I guess.
Well,
Before they had casinos.
you got to remember too, and this is very similar to the Osage story, that if a mining company wanted on a particular Latee's land, a particular Quapaw tribal member's land, if the Quapaw tribal member didn't want to engage with them, they would either have them declared incompetent by the federal government, and then the BIA would have the ability to sign on their behalf. Number 2, they'd burn them out. Number 3, they'd kill them. Number 4, they'd marry them.
Oh, and then kill them. Well, that's why they let them, the Osage chiefs went ahead or the Quapaw chiefs went ahead and let them do it, is because they were going to get it anyway.
Well, and it wasn't up to anybody in the tribal government. That land and the mineral rights belonged to the individual Quapaw Alatee that had been placed on that land. So
What's an Alatee?
An Alatee this came out of the Dawes Allotment Act in the 1860s. And what it meant was our reservation was designated in 1833. But after that, by 1893 and 1894, each individual Quapaw that was on the census got a particular piece of land. And it was basically to break up our communal living and to put us on individual pieces of land.
Oh.
It was an act toward, allotment and assimilation, were all parts of the same federal Indian policy. And so once they separated everybody, here's the key difference. Unlike the Osage, who maintained overall mineral rights collectively, Quapaw didn't do that. The mineral rights belonged to the individual Quapaw that received that land allotment. It's called a land patent.
Yeah.
And so they had the mineral rights, and only they could make the decision about what they wanted done with their land unless they were declared incompetent. And then the federal government would basically sign off on just about anything. And they got pennies on the dollar for what they should have received in terms of the
well, they're smart that they got the mineral rights, because I know people like up in Searcy where they're doing fracking that have property and they don't have mineral rights, and they didn't know it. And these big companies come in and start drilling on their land. And they're like, I didn't know I didn't have my the mineral rights below me. So the Quapaws and the Osage were pretty smart to do that.
There's a downside to it too. But,
yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, because the Quapaw who were signing off, the ones who did not get declared incompetent or the government decided for them, here's what got left. And this is what's created the Superfund site and the contamination, is that when they bring the ore out of the ground and extract the lead and the zinc, what's left is called mining tailings. And the mining tailings are hundreds and hundreds of feet high, bigger than football fields, multiple of them. All that excess rock that was ground up got brought up out of the ground and left on the top of the ground. Well, there are trace amounts of lead in that, and it's in the air, it's in the water, and it's in the ground. And that's why it's a Superfund site.
Do you live near that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
How's your memory?
Not so great these days, but the biggest impact is to the kids.
Yeah.
It's to the kids.
So it's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's still having that big of an effect.
Well, we're still remediating to clean it up.
Are you?
And so in concert with the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, we're cleaning it up ourselves.
You need to put it back in the hole and bury it? Is that the
No, we actually sell off the marketable, what they call chat. Those are the mine tailings. Some of it's marketable, and it's perfectly fine, and we sell that under the supervision of the BIA.
Oh.
And then the unmarketable chat we put in what's called a repository, which is a great big piece of land. I mean, it's very, very tall. And then eventually we'll have to encapsulate it under multiple feet of topsoil.
Kind of like a landfill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Except it's exactly.
Is it on your reservation too? but it's just far away from everybody.
Yeah.
I've watched a documentary on the remediation and the lead mines
Tar
and
Creek?
stuff. Yes, that was it. Yeah.
What was it?
It's fascinating. Awful, but Tar Creek, is that what it was called? Yeah.
Correct.
And it's the scale of it all is what I think is the most incredible, because like you said, it's like football fields of these piles of rock that are contaminated with lead. And they're just out back of these tiny little communities where their kids go run and play and run up these piles, and it's just like it's like the stories you used to tell about how you all played in the DDT trucks because you didn't know any better,
Oh, behind the
like
the mosquito trucks.
Yeah, it's like, and I imagine there's a little bit of that there too, but like that exposure, the scale of that exposure is crazy on so many levels in that place. It's astounding to think that we can like allow that to happen, because you think about like places like Chernobyl or something where you have this awful exposure and nobody's allowed within this perimeter and stuff. And it's just right there in the backyard in Oklahoma. It's crazy.
So tell us about, we call them the Quapaws, but before the interview, you pronounced it correctly for us. How do you say Quapaw?
Ogapa.
Ogapa.
Mhm.
Oh, huh?
Ogapa.
Ogapa. Under duress, the Quapaws ceded 20 million acres in Arkansas to the federal government, hanging on to between 2 million and 3 million acres in the Little Rock area. How did they lose that?
I don't think they really had a choice. So that was the first treaty with the U.S. in 1818. There was just so much pressure for westward expansion and settlers coming in. This is rich farmland. I can understand why people of European descent would have wanted this land, because it is so rich. I think a lot of it had to do with, the tribe today is still not as big as it was in terms of population at the time of European first contact, which would have been 1673. We're still not back to that size. And so there were so few of us. Why did we deserve to have all this land when all these people wanted to be farmers and to, work the soil, grow crops? So we had an expanding country. I mean, I kind of understand it. I don't agree with it, but that's a different issue.
Yeah. You said they just outgunned you, probably.
Yeah.
They brought horses and guns and a cavalry.
We went, it was a year ago, April. Our 1818 treaty is actually quite beautiful. It's got artwork on it. It's one of the few that has that. And they call those friendship treaties.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Where we ceded all that land in 1818. And there was they were bringing out a series of either 17 or 18 of them out at NMAI in D.C. So National Museum of American Indian, I had to stop and think about what that acronym actually meant. And they did a beautiful unveiling, and it was there at NMAI for about 6 months. And even after the unveiling, I went back to visit with it a couple of times. And it's hard because I know that some of the people who signed that treaty are quoted. They didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They had no choice. And had they not done that, we wouldn't have had any chance of survival at all. That's why they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing in 1824 when we lost the rest of our land here in Arkansas. And then they moved us down to the Red River with the Caddo, who didn't want us. Floods, tribe is continuing to decrease, starvation, disease, elements. They marched us down there in January. In January. Who does that?
And this is right after the signing of the treaty, right?
Would have been 1826.
Yeah. And then
when they marched us down.
At what point do we see them all, I guess, eventually get to Oklahoma?
So after we were in cattle country for a couple of years, and it just was a disaster. Everybody dispersed, and there were a significant number of Quapaw that came back to Saracen's land, up here.
Oh,
By
yeah.
Pine Bluff.
Correct. So anyway, there are a number of Quapaws that went to live on the Canadian River with the Muskogee Creeks, to Texas with some of the Cherokee. So they dispersed all over the place.
I see.
And then it wasn't until 1833 they designated our reservation in northeastern Oklahoma. And so we were there in about 1834. And the story gets worse because once we got to northeastern Oklahoma, we reside in a county with 8 other tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were piling everybody in. And they realized pretty quickly after we had already built structures that we were about 1 mile off of where we should have been. So they made us move again. Then we got to where we needed to be. And then here comes the Civil War.
Mm.
And they ran us off the land again. And that's about when Tall Chief took so many of the Quapaw to Osage because we didn't have any place to be. And then we all had to go back to the reservation in 1890 when they were taking the census for
And
that.
that's
We had to be
your
back there by that time.
great grandfather?
Great.
Great grandfather. Yeah.
That's what I mean by we've been displaced a whole multitude of times. And I tend to think that's one of the reasons that some of us are so comfortable with moving all the time. It's somehow built into our DNA. It's like, oh, okay.
So
And we're gonna move again.
the first time they signed the friendship treaty,
Mhm.
where were they sent to?
No place. They just moved us. We were just on a smaller piece of land on a couple million acres. I mean, that sounds like a huge piece of land, and it is.
Yeah.
But you got to remember the land that we had, and that's what so many tribes were fighting over. It wasn't where they resided, it's where they hunted.
Right.
Mhm.
And you had to protect, because there were buffalo all over here.
Right.
Yeah.
I should say bison. My apologies.
That's all right. So, yeah, you just went from 20 million acres in Arkansas to 2 or 3 million acres around Little Rock. So they didn't actually move you yet. They just reduced your hunting land.
Correct.
And then they came along 6 years later and said, you got to get off the property and go to Oklahoma. Or no, the Cato River. And then you went to the Cato River, and I guess there's a Cato tribe down there.
Yep. That's
So-
where the Caddos are.
The Catos. And
Yeah, on the
so,
river- river.
and so those river people are like, there's not enough room for everybody here. And you're getting sick. Everybody's getting mosquito bit and sick. And so then you move again back to Pine Bluff to
Correct.
Chief Saracen. And then you get moved again to Oklahoma. Okay, I got it.
Dispersed.
Dispersed. Talk about Chief Saracen. Who was this guy?
So Saracen was a mixed blood Quapaw French. And one of the really valuable traits that he had, I think, to both the U.S. side as well as to the Quapaw, was that he spoke both languages,
French and
English
Quapaw
and Quapaw.
nice.
Incredibly
Is Quapaw
valuable.
French, you think?
No,
More?
No, they were just the first ones that the Quapaw intermarried with.
Oh,
Because
okay.
the French were here before. But he was significant because, and I understand some of the stories that are taught here in Arkansas, and they're lovely. What's interesting is because he was mixed blood, he could actually own land
Oh,
before Arkansas was a state. If you were full blood, you couldn't own land.
Hmm.
They were busy taking it away.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
Hmm. So was he a big landowner in what is now Pine Bluff, I guess? Yeah.
but he still
okay.
got kicked off his land.
Eventually,
They still got
Eventually.
moved to Oklahoma, didn't they?
Mhm.
Eventually, yeah. And if you go through Pine Bluff, even before they put in Saracen Casino, there's a Saracen landing for
Mhm.
the river that flows
and
down
of course,
there.
that's where he's buried, is there at St. Joseph's.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice. So, as the head woman dancer in 2010 for the Kahikaste, how do you say it?
Oh, gosh.
Kahikaste.
Kahikaste powwow. Tell us what that meant. What that means.
So it's an honor to be asked to do something of that nature. And it's one of those occasions where, even though in your mind you're saying, you know what, this is another commitment. I don't know if I really have time or the energy or
Sure.
the ability to do that. But in your heart, you have to say yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're taught. When you're asked to do something of that nature, you're not just representing yourself. Matter of fact, that's probably the least important. You're representing your family, you're representing those that can't dance, and you're representing all your tribal nations, whether it's one or
beautiful.
multitude.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Kahikasta. What does that mean?
So it's actually Kahikasteta. The name of the powwow is just a shortened version of it, but it's named after my great-great-grandfather.
Well, you've got really deep roots. So
Mhm.
who was your Tall Chief? Is that who you're talking about? Oh, I thought maybe it was another one. Is there a main career on the reservation to keep people from leaving?
Well, actually, the Quapaws were the largest employer in that part of Oklahoma as well as Southwest Missouri, and it's our downstream casino and resort. 39 tribes in Oklahoma. Most of the tribes have one or multiple casinos. So the hospitality industry is huge.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, of course, there are a whole multitude of hospitals. So we're blessed to have two other business committee members who are healthcare professionals. So that's a big industry up there. But you've got to, obviously that requires education and certifications and maintaining those certifications. But it's when you get outside of the hospitality industry, there's not a lot there. And that's one of the things that we talk about and are trying to take action on from an economic development standpoint, because we've got to give people a reason to stay. So it's primarily two key constraints. One, lack of housing. So
really?
We've been working with the Miami Area Economic Development Authority on, they just finished a housing analysis because there is such a housing shortage. So you've got to have good homes, good residences for people to reside, and not ones that cost $800 a month to heat. Number two, you got to have jobs that are really attractive to not just my generation, but the upcoming generations. And the way that they like to work and the modes of work have got to shift with that. Mining is gone. We don't have oil.
But construction, if you've got to build these houses, you're going to have construction workers. So that's kind of contradictory to what you said earlier when you said that the Osage or tribes take up 60% of Oklahoma's land, but at the same time, they have this limited industry. It seems like if you had 60% of the land, you would have all the industry from construction to education.
Aeronautics.
Yeah, it seems like you would, but it's not that way because people leave.
People leave.
They
In
graduate.
Oklahoma, there's not a lot on the eastern
I've
half
been
of,
to Tulsa and I've been to
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma City both lately, and they're huge now.
Oh yeah, those places are absolutely.
But I haven't been outside of that.
Right. And once you get away from Tulsa and Oklahoma City, you're in the heartland of rural America.
That's where you are. Alcohol and substance abuse on the reservation. You hear about it all the time. Even my father talked about it, maybe not in a very colorful way. But is that really a thing?
It is a thing. It is a thing.
And
that multi-generational.
My husband has the gene. He has that alcohol gene that's run in his family for generations. And I do believe that it's a gene. So look out, Gray.
Yeah. We've talked about that on this podcast a lot too.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. He does not have, you do not have that gene.
But yeah, it is very apparent. Like there's a family history of it. It can be intergenerational. Yeah.
And that's the reason we actually, and it was long before I came into office, we have a program called Quapaw Counseling Services. And it's a dosing clinic, but we also have other types of counseling available for both the adults as well as through our youth development program. So those things are very real. One of the big objectives we've got is to figure out how to build basically a detox and an inpatient facility.
Is it because they're bored? Besides the genetic component, is it just boredom? I mean, sometimes I drink when I'm bored. I'm bored, let's have a drink. Yeah.
But there are correlations between substance abuse and that lead.
Oh.
And I'm not saying the lead created it.
Oh, but I
think it
totally
increases the propensity.
See that. Painters are around a lot of lead base and they have drinking problems.
Well, and if you end up developing health issues because you're surrounded by a bunch of heavy metals, then you can get addicted to opiates because you have to deal with like medications and stuff like that. I mean, it's a feedback loop,
When we screen printed, we had a lot of painters here, and they always talked about, those guys always talked about it among themselves about alcoholism and the paint and the lead in the paint and so on. Well, that's really interesting. I think you may have found the crux of it.
One of the fascinating things, and it's not a good thing, that I've learned since I was in office is that you may have a tribal member or even a community member that is trying to break the cycle and they want to go into rehab, but you have to be detoxed before you go into rehab.
Right.
And they don't want to go into detox because then their kids will get taken away. So how do you provide those family support services so those kids aren't permanently removed from the home, or at least even temporarily, for the parent to go through a very intentional program of healing.
Yeah.
And trying to introduce the really positive things we have about the Quapaw culture as a part of that healing process.
Mhm.
So those are some of the big challenges that we're still trying to solve for.
Mhm.
But it's all about breaking that intergenerational cycle.
And so their kids are taken away because they're the main parent for their child or something.
Especially if the other parent might be incarcerated or just gone.
So yeah, babysitting. Yeah, or you need a parent or someone to take them from you. Also, the other thing that I don't know if this is true or not, but I've watched a few documentaries on missing children and missing women as an epidemic on the reservation. Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing, MMIW. So
MMIW.
missing and murdered Indigenous women.
That's a real thing that
is
you
a
see
real
on TV. Why is that, do you think?
So I'm just going to, I don't have a great answer for you, but I'll give you a little bit of a story. When the EPA first, actually, it goes back to the early mining days, when the mines first began to get, or the minerals began to get exploited, there were these pop-up communities. And they didn't always attract, I mean, they attracted workers, but they also attracted a bunch of layabouts and ne'er-do-wells who, exploited the Quapaw women. The same thing happened when the EPA first came in and started some of the remediation and the cleanup work after the Superfund designation. They brought in contractors, and one of the things that the community experienced was an increase in those types of crimes. These people that were brought in because they're contractors, they're not the folks that they grew up with. They didn't go to high school with them. Their aunt doesn't know their mom, and that makes a big difference in terms of coming into a community and having ties or the lack thereof and feeling perfectly enabled to take advantage of everybody and everything that you can. The good news is the contractors are gone because they made everybody so mad. And that's when Quapaw Nation took over the remediation work.
Oh.
So that's a story about how those things happen. Think about the oil and gas contractors and companies that come into any community. I don't care what kind of resource it is. They could be, loggers or whatever. They don't have ties to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they've got free reign.
Mm-hmm.
You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. They talk about this now in the Dakotas because of the oil shale boom that's happening up there. That you have a lot of
transients.
And people who are there for the jobs, but their families are elsewhere or something like that. And there's a bunch of employees with stuff that have money to spend. And
bunch of men, bunch of hedonistic men.
Bunch of men in a foreign community just looking to blow off steam after they've worked on an oil field for
crazy men.
Potentially, if you
my favorite
working
kind.
12 hours a day. But yeah, like that affects the community around you. You don't know people. It leads to a lot of domestic abuse, things like that. And then back to the substance abuse too. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and they can kidnap them and then they move out and they're gone and the trail is
nobody
cold.
knows.
The trail is cold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like truck drivers working at the truck stops.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue talking to Miss Wena Supernaw, the head chair of Oklahoma's Quapaw Nation. In this next segment, we'll learn about their decision to build Saracen Casino and Resort in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where in the 1800s, a sect of the Quapaws once lived, led by Chief Saracen. We'll be right back.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Got ourselves a flag violation. Stop right there!
Who are you?
We're the flag police.
And this is a crime scene.
Excuse me?
I think what my partner's trying to say is that your flag looks a little tired. I think it's time for a new one.
Oh, I guess you're right. It is a little tattered.
Don't worry, ma'am. Flagandbanner.com is here to help. With their wide selection and knowledgeable staff, they'll have you sorted out in no time. Flagandbanner.com. We're the experts.
We're speaking today with Miss Wena Supernaw, the head chair of Oklahoma's Quapaw Nation, the tribe who founded the Saracen Casino in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. If you're just tuning in, we've talked about the coming together of the Osage and the Quapaw in Oklahoma. We've talked about the plight of the Osage when not just our government, the American government, but, other governments or other foreign people came over and wanted land and forced the Osage, not the Osage,
Quapaw.
thank you, the Quapaw out of Arkansas, who had 20 million acres. I just want to say that they hunted and harvested from, and that they're now in Oklahoma. But they're back with the Saracen Casino, and so we're going to talk a little bit to Wena about that. So I learned in my interview with Saracen's marketing director, Carlton Safa, about the chief, who was the Quapaw tribe was originally in Pine Bluff, and that Chief Saracen was there. And then you told me in an earlier segment he spoke French, English, and Quapaw. And did you tell me how they came and actually took his land from him and moved him to Oklahoma?
I don't know if he was still alive at the time that we moved to Oklahoma, to be honest with you. I'd have to go back and look. But I do want to say that there's something very, very special about Pine Bluff, that whole area from there all the way over to the Arkansas Post. Because that's where we were. One of our original villages, Ossetoy, is still right there on the other side of the water from the Arkansas Post.
What is the Arkansas Post?
A town on the eastern border.
Why is it called the Arkansas Post? Was it the post office?
I can't. I think it was a
post
like
for
a
something.
checkpoint in early.
Well, it was a fort.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
was
So it was a fort.
It
All
was
right.
the first, if I'm not mistaken, it was the very first community that was built in this part of Arkansas.
That's why it's the Arkansas Post. It's like the outpost.
It's where Daniel Boone went.
Something like that.
Probably.
One of those things.
So I love driving out there. I saw the Saracen Landing where you said that the chief was buried. I'm going to go and look at I love graves. I always visit.
What is it about getting older? All of a sudden, we like hanging out at, cemeteries.
Mom's always been like that,
I've
though.
always been
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, people, if you find an old cemetery, take a sack lunch, take your top off and do a little sunbathing. There's nobody ever there.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Just lay on those tombstones.
Yeah.
It's nice and quiet. So tell us how you decided to put the Saracen Casino in Pine Bluff. I'm sure it's because of the chief, but what was the conversation that led up to that? And how did you get a license here in Arkansas?
So this all precedes my time in office. So this is my understanding. Originally, they bought land, 2 parcels of land, really at the port. And the original intention was to put a casino right there at the port, which in an industrial park, it makes no sense, in my mind. Railroad tracks without crossing guards, that could have caused all sorts of public safety issues with those that might stay late in the evening and over imbibe. That would have been a disaster. So then they bought the land in Pine Bluff and sold the land up at the port, except for 1 acre. But Pine Bluff is, in my mind, where we needed to be all the time.
Well, I thought you said this was before your time.
It
but
is.
You weren't the chair, but you're still on the committee.
No, I'm not on the committee until 2021.
It's just her opinion.
Oh, correct. Just my opinion. We needed to be in Pine Bluff the entire time because that's home. That's kind of the center point in Arkansas for us. And so it makes perfect sense. Saracen's buried there. Saracen Landing is right there. And aside from the fact, we knew that it would, the collective we, how about that? We knew it was going to have a huge positive impact to Jefferson County. And that has played out and will continue to play out. And it's a beautiful thing to be a part of, I don't know, not a renewal, but a rebirth of that part of the state. And to be a part of that is just incredible. I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be there. And happy that we're doing the expansion. By the time all's said and done, we'll be about $600 million into it.
What year did you open the casino?
2020, October of 2020.
So 5 years. So that's good.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long to build it.
We would have liked to, now I can say this, we would have liked to have done it sooner. But one of the issues we had was when we were getting ready to, go to the point of a gross maximum price on the expansion, the problem was that's when the banks were getting a little hinky. So some of the smaller regional banks were beginning to show signs of stress and they tightened up credit significantly. And so we just backed off for a little while and decided let's let the market smooth itself out, and then we can get back into the capital markets to borrow the money that we needed in order to complete.
So you borrowed money.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you not already have a casino?
We already had the casino from 2020. By the time all's said and done, about 70% of the construction cost of the expansion is through self-generated cash flows.
So you just needed to borrow another 30%.
Correct.
So you opened a casino in Oklahoma, was your first one.
The very first one was many, many years ago. It's called Quapaw Casino and is in an old broom factory. So it's way past its prime, and we're
Where
actually
is that? In Oklahoma?
in Quapaw.
In Quapaw, on the reservation.
Correct.
And
And we're building a new one now. Downstream Casino and Resort, that one's a gaming floor, 2 towers of a hotel, golf course, an event center. That one opened 17 years ago.
And where's that one?
That's in Quapaw as well, but it's way up on the border of where Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri come together.
So you've put it down in there. So you borrowed 30%. You gambled on gambling in Pine Bluff. You weren't concerned. You were more interested in the chief, Saracen, and the history of Pine Bluff and your tribe. Did you even take into consideration that the town is going away? I mean, you've come back and saved Pine Bluff. It was once a thriving metropolis when the river was used to move goods up and down the river. But now, once the railroad was built, Pine Bluff started suffering.
But we did do an economic impact analysis before committing to building the original casino.
So your mission is to safeguard the assets of the tribe, not just for today, but for many generations.
Right.
And your background is in finance. How solid is the Quapaw Nation?
So I'll answer it from an accounting and finance standpoint. Yes. We're in great shape. I couldn't say that 4 or 5 years ago.
Is it the casinos?
And I think, well, this is what it's from. It was, at that point in time, there had been insufficient focus on paying down the debt to show positive equity in not only Saracen, but also Downstream Casino and Resort. And those are, our 2 largest properties. And as a result, they need to be safeguarded. They need capital improvements. They need to be maintained properly to continue attracting the right kinds of patrons that are happy to enjoy the hospitality experience that we have to offer. If you can't show positive equity, you can't show a positive cash flow for many, many years to come. And the way we think is I care about the current generation. I care about our elders. I care about our kids that are here. But what about 7 generations from now? In order for the Quapaw to survive, we need to have the right resources available to continue preserving, protecting, and growing our culture, our traditions, and our language. That's what it's all about.
Culture, traditions, and language.
Because without those, there's nothing unique.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what
like
sets us
other
apart.
Oklahomian.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So we have to protect those assets to the best of our ability to ensure future survival.
I love it. I was actually disappointed when these football teams and sports teams quit using the word Indians. I was like, no, keep using it. I felt like that was an asset to keep the Indians in front of us and to remind us that they were once here. But for some reason, people thought that was. Can you speak to that? Why was that insulting?
Absolutely. It is a misappropriation of culture.
Oh, there you go. That's what it is.
And that's a fancy word, but what does that really mean? What it means is we lost the ability to tell our own narrative in our own way. Mm-hmm. Hollywood did that. Zane Grey. I love reading Zane Grey books. That it stole pieces of our culture and made us all seem as if it was a single one. When the fact is, there are hundreds of Native nations here in the U.S. We needed to take back and empower ourselves to tell our story in our way, as imperfect as it may be. But it's our story, and it's only ours to tell. It's not for some sport franchise. Well, I do have a side story to tell you who did a really great job with that.
Who?
Were the Seminole Nation of Florida.
Oh.
Want to know what they did with Florida State?
Uh-uh.
They said, you can keep, using the war hoop and all that, continue being the Seminoles. You're going to pay us.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to tell you how, when, and where to utilize that.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good way
They
to
took
do it.
back their iconography, all of that. Seminole Nation of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Smart.
Brilliant move.
Very smart.
So before we go, are there any gambling tips?
Not for me. I'm not allowed to gamble.
Are you not?
I hold a gaming license.
Oh, so you can't gamble.
we
right,
go.
right. Yeah,
Well-
that's just the truth of it.
Interesting. When's the so you changed it from Saracen Casino to Saracen Casino and Resort. So you're about to have a resort open. When is that scheduled?
So late this year.
Oh,
So
That's exciting.
320 rooms in the hotel tower, 1,600 seat event center. It's going to be about 400,000 more square feet under roof. So it's going to be a big deal. We may see a phased opening where not everything comes online at the same time, just to give us the opportunity to get the kinks worked out before we're at full capacity.
and isn't kind of the goal? So now people from Little Rock can go down there and gamble and spend the night. And isn't there going to be like a stage or an entertainment venue that we can get good performers to come
That's
and
right.
perform?
That's the event center.
How big is the event center going to be?
1,600 seat.
That's not too big. That's a good size.
It is a good size. And I'll liken it to a couple of other places, musical venues primarily that I've been to that are about the same size. There's a venue in Tulsa, it's in Catoosa, that's about that same size. It's either 1,400 or 1,500 square feet, a seat.
Mm-hmm.
The sound quality is amazing. It's a wonderful setting with comfortable seats, and that's what we're going to have. It'll be a flexible space. So you don't necessarily have to have a 16-person, need. Okay, it can, the seating can be pulled back to be able to use it as a conference and event center too.
Oh, really?
So it's going to be a really flexible space.
Nice. So finish these sentences. The Quapaw and Osage people are.
Degiha Suwon.
Oh, perfect. The Saracen Casino and Resort hopes to.
Rebuild Pine Bluff.
Wena Supernaw's future plans are to.
Retire yet once again.
Those are some of the best
Those are good.
answers
Those
I've
are
ever
great.
gotten.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wena Supernaw, head of Oklahoma's Quapaw Nation, for sharing your story, the tribe story, and the story of Quapaws in Arkansas. And we're glad they're back with Saracen Casino and Resort in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Wena, these are all the flags of all the states that the Osage, the Quapaw lived in: Oklahoma, Missouri, Louisiana, and Arkansas. And that's a desk set for you of the flags.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's
I've enjoyed visiting with you. This show was recorded in the historical Taborian Hall in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, and made possible by the good works of flagandbanner.com, Mr. Tom Wood, our audio engineer, Mr. Jonathan Hankins, our videographer, Miss Delora DeVore, production manager, and my co-host, Son Gray, Mr. Grady McCoy IV. To our listeners, we would like to thank you for spending time with us. We hope you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For more of Kerry's interviews, click on either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.